Hey everybody, welcome back to our ramblings here, the yackings of a pregnant muse, or musings of a pregnant yak, or whatever you decide to call it, whatever you call it. And we decided, since last week was kind of heavy, we'd do something a little bit lighter this time, talking about superheroes.
I love superheroes.
Oh, so do I, and I always wanted to be one.
Yeah.
I think I really wanted to be Green Lantern, only because I could make different things from the lanterns, or one of the magic superheroes.
Well, when I was a kid, we used to play superheroes all the time because all my friends and I were all big into comic books, and I can say it's always been the same. I'm very loyal, but I've always wanted to be the Silver Age Hawkman.
Age Hawkman.
The Thanagarian police officer
that was
who comes to Earth to fight crime with all the high tech and everything.
And speaking of Hawkman, he's one of the original Golden Age superheroes.
Yes.
One of the ones from the original Justice Society. I think his first appearance was in Flash issue 1.
It was in as a backup story in Flash, but of course back then he was an Egyptian prince reincarnated.
Right.
That came back with the wings of fire.
And I think now they retrofitted. That was one of his past lives, because now they show him just reborn, and one of them, his rebirths, is a Thanagarian policeman.
And then, of course, if you go to the, I guess it's Elseworlds now, the Kingdom Come, which came out a number of years ago, which is the supposed future, 20 years in the future. He's actually, the Egyptian mythos, he's actually morphed into like a hawk-like god.
Hawk god, yeah. Well, that's what he is. He's a hawk god.
Yeah.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves. I do like looking at some of the old stories, the original Golden Age stories. When you look back at them, they were actually pretty nasty. Those guys were mean. I mean, you have Superman in Action Comics 1 holding a guy up, to getting him to confess, just holding him ready to drop him.
Well, a friend of mine had to tell me about this, and I finally went and looked back at the old Detective Comics where Batman came out. Detective Comics was the comic book that he was premiered in. And, because I've grown up with the Batman on the 60s TV show.
Well, that's one I grew up with,
too. And in the 70s, where Batman was kind of lighthearted and would tell jokes with the Justice League and everything. And here I am reading this comic book, and Batman's in the Batplane strafing gangsters in their cars with machine guns, like oh my god. Batman was
pretty violent back then. But in the 70s, it did start to change a little bit. He became darker, and it all changed, of course, with Alan Moore's Dark Knight, and even
Frank Miller's, wasn't it?
Frank Miller's, yeah. I'm sorry, Frank Miller with the Dark Knight, and then when the Crisis came with Year One,
right.
He went back to his dark roots, and I think that kind of just fits Batman, because he is sort of that urban, gritty Gotham kind of hero.
Well, it does fit the persona that they came up with in the comic books. I mean, when your motivation for being a hero is your parents being murdered in front of you, you would think that makes you kind of a more darker hero, as opposed to Superman, whose origin is he's found by this kindly Midwestern couple that takes him in and tells him, "Oh, you're not a freak. You're our son. We love you, and you're going to do great things."
But they said, and this is from the Man of Steel movie with the symbol that he has that means hope, and that's what it means in Kryptonian hope.
Right.
That's what the House of El did. I actually think Batman stands more for hope than Superman.
Really? Why?
Well,
I don't get that.
I mean. And I'm going to go back to what I told you before. My favorite scene with Batman is Batman and Ace from Justice League Unlimited.
Okay.
He comes up and he's sitting with Ace. She's got all these great powers and she's dying. And he's like, "I knew you wouldn't kill me. That's why I let you in." And he throws away the thing that Amanda Waller gives him. And she says,
to kill her.
"I'm dying." He says, "Will you sit with me?" And he does. And he holds out his hand. He always seems to have hope for all the villains. You notice he doesn't kill any of the villains.
Well, I mean, I think he's a strict anti-killing rule because of his parents.
But he also has hope that someday that they can reform, that they will.
Yeah, but of course, and let's not forget that also causes a lot of the storylines in the DC universe with the Joker, because he gets criticized. Like, all these times you could have ended this monster's terrorist ring where you knew he was going to come out and kill people.
But he still has,
and you still haven't done it.
But he still has hope to reform them, and that's why he keeps putting them into Arkham Asylum. That's why that's why all the villains are there.
Well, and let's not forget one of the more recent Justice League movies where he escapes and kidnaps pregnant Lois, sticks a bomb in her chest that when her heart stops will trigger this nuclear weapon that blows up all of Metropolis.
Well, that
kills everyone in Metropolis.
That's
Lois dies.
That's.
I mean, and then it turns Superman into an authoritarian monster.
But that's a separate universe. That's the Injustice timeline.
But that was the same reason in Kingdom Come. Again, we're referencing that in the '80s, where Superman basically just gave up and went off to the Fortress of Solitude for the rest of his life because of the criticism he got for not killing the Joker when he had the chance.
I don't think he can. I mean, the Joker is too much like him.
Well, the superhero that supposedly replaced him is the one that killed the Joker in the story.
Well, yeah, they
caught the Joker after he killed. After the Joker killed everyone in the Daily Planet building in Kingdom Come, Superman and Batman caught him, or Superman did, and they were about to send him to trial, and this guy shows up and just blows a hole in it. And he was acquitted. That's the whole thing. Everyone realized that he was such a monster and all the things he'd done that the death penalty.
And you know that there's not just one Joker.
No, I know.
According to the Mobius chair, where
that's no, I don't want to get into New Gods. That's where DC went off the rails in the '70s, or when Jack Kirby.
It was just an answer to what Marvel did with
I know. Jack Kirby defected from Marvel after his fallout with
Stan Lee.
The New Gods, and Jimmy Olsen in the New Gods, and Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen.
Well, speaking of Marvel, I noticed Marvel's heroes are more grounded, more gritty, more urban type.
Well, they're definitely more down to earth characters, and I think that was on purpose with a lot of them because unlike a lot of the flashy superheroes in DC, in Marvel you had the ones that always have issues. They always have problems.
And they were real problems.
Right.
Yeah, Spider-Man trying to grow up and being a teenager with a teenage angst. The X-Men with the X-Men as for the civil rights movements. Right.
And then all the things that they were dealing with, like when the Thing, the Fantastic Four, you have all these different people, and then of course the Thing becomes a giant rock, which is screwing with his head. But they all have their human flaws, and it goes back to humanity, and that's what I think Marvel was shooting for.
And I think they achieved that up until the '80s, when DC started to realize that formula,
right.
And then DC started to humanize their heroes and give
them
problems.
Quite a bit actually.
Yeah,
you just look back to the comic books we talked about with Frank Miller doing The Dark Knight, and then.
Swamp Thing.
We won't even talk about Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, where he took
the whole American Gothic era, the whole American Gothic.
That's when Watchmen came out. I mean, the '80s was kind of another new golden era of comic books, but they became very dark. Sandman came out, Watchmen came out. Alan Moore's working on Swamp Thing. Neil Gaiman with Sandman, like I just mentioned, and everything took a little more darker, more story-oriented universe, and even some of the superhero comic books kind of transformed to that too.
Yeah, even something as flashy as the Flash, mm-hmm. We found out he had problems. He has to eat. His metabolism.
Yeah, I remember when that first started and everything, where they it seemed that they translated that into. If you didn't know, ladies and gentlemen, there was a 1990s Flash TV series. And that's where that whole thing started, where he realized he had to consume huge amounts of food because his super speed made him burn tons of calories. Or he would just pass out. He'd faint from malnutrition or whatever the hell it was.
They kind of fixed that with the new series.
Right.
Well, with the new series they followed more the comic book now that he channels the Speed Force, and that's why he.
Yeah, that's where DC loses me with some of the stuff. The whole thing with the Speed Force and I was never a huge fan of the Crisis, all the different Crisis things, because it's just they made it within the multiverse, and it was there.
The multiverse was an excuse.
Well, the multiverse was an excuse because DC had bought a comic company named Charlton, and Charlton was the comics company that owned the rights to Captain Marvel.
No. Charlton. No, Fawcett owned.
Fawcett and Charlton.
But Charlton owned Blue Beetle, The Question, Captain Atom.
So they bought these companies, and then this was their way to incorporate all these heroes into the one universe.
And then they had other storylines that didn't quite fit into it, and then they said, "Oh, it's just another universe." Like Commandy. What were some of the other storylines? The '60s kind of thing. The animals as superheroes.
Right.
The zoo crew.
And how they were. And it's also their attempt to try to incorporate the 1940s versions of Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman, who in the 80s and 90s would be in their 60s, 70s, 80 years old, but now it's from multiple universes, so they existed.
And now that they said, oh well, we can create even more multiverses and just have that. And then I think Marvel picked up on the multiverse after DC picked up on the multiverse.
Marvel lost me in the 80s with Secret Wars. That was oh my god.
How about Secret Wars 2?
I couldn't even finish Secret Wars 1. Can you ask me to get into Secret Wars 2?
Don't even get into Secret Wars 2.
But I haven't read comic books since Sandman was canceled.
I haven't read them either. I'll occasionally look at some, there occasionally I'll get a
catalog?
No, a graphic novel.
Right.
Occasionally I'll get a graphic novel. I think the last one I got was for the Dark Multiverse, which is the DC's version of things that go bad.
Right.
The Batman Who Laughs.
The vampires, where everyone's turning into vampires.
That's one of the dark verses. There's a universe where Batman becomes the Green Lantern and kills all the other Green Lanterns. That's Batman.
That's pretty dark.
That's Batman Dawnbreaker, because the ring comes to him after his parents are killed, and there's another one where he kills the Flash and absorbs the Speed Force.
Batman's getting pretty grim.
It's called Batman Red Death.
Batman's getting pretty grim.
There's another Batman where he becomes a cyborg after Alfred is killed, and he becomes a cyborg. There's another one where he becomes like Doomsday. There's another one where he's
all right, enough.
Where he
enough.
He's the God of War. The whole dark multiverse.
Okay,
I know that's enough.
I'm not reading any of those.
But I think we still need there's a place for us to have these superheroes, and the better the storytelling, we both agree that we want good stories.
Definitely.
And there are good stories out there.
Yes,
there are shows, and there are TV shows and animated series that have good stories out there.
Well, I know we're getting pretty close to either 10 minutes or a little over. We try to keep these short, but I've argued with you many times that, and we've talked about it, how one of the best shows they've ever done only made it to one season. They didn't even renew it before. They canceled it before it even got into season 2, which is Swamp Thing.
I loved it.
The Swamp Thing TV series they made just a couple of years ago was incredible.
And they canceled it
before they even aired the first episode. They canceled it.
It was so good.
It was really good. The acting was good. The sceneries, the sets, the plots, everything was very good. But we're just two guys. And all we're doing is bitching.
And we're just grumpy.
We're a couple of pregnant yaks.
All right. And
what else are we going to talk about?
I think that's.
I think we could fill up like hours arguing about this.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll have to keep superheroes as a topic for the future.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit more about this.
And if you guys like it, please like us.
Yeah, like us. Yeah, we got nothing to lose. Or comment something.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
All right. Next time.